Beneath the sands of time, an empire of unimaginable power and mystery left behind clues so brazen, so bold, that they've been staring us in the face for thousands of years. The Assyrian Empire didn't just rule the ancient world with an iron fist, they wove secrets into the very stones of their palaces, buried truths in their grandest monuments, and encoded messages in artifacts we've walked past for generations. Today, those hidden truths are finally coming to light. What if I told you that the winged statues guarding their cities weren't just decorations but silent sentinels holding cryptic warnings? That their legendary library contained tablets someone desperately wanted erased from history? Or that their kings may have fled their burning capital with treasures we still haven't found? From blood-stained palace walls whispering of psychological warfare, to a queen's cursed tomb vanishing without a trace, to astrological codes hidden in lion hunt carvings, we're about to uncover 25 jaw-dropping secrets the Assyrians left in plain sight. These aren't just dusty old relics, these are puzzles, scandals, and forbidden knowledge that rewrite everything we thought we knew about history's first superpower. Stick around, because by the end of this journey, you'll never look at ancient art, artifacts, or even the night sky the same way again. The Assyrians weren't just hiding their secrets, they were daring us to find them. Let's begin. Now let's step into the shadow of the Lamassu, those towering winged bull statues that stood guard at the gates of Assyria's grandest palaces. At first glance, they seem like mere symbols of strength, but look closer, and you'll discover these stone sentinels were whispering secrets in plain sight. The Lamassu weren't just decorative marvels, they were masterpieces of psychological and spiritual engineering. Carved with the body of a bull, the wings of an eagle, and the head of a human, they embodied the Assyrian belief in dominating earth, sky, and mankind. But here's what most museums won't tell you: their poses held hidden meanings. When viewed from the front, they appear to stand still, a symbol of unwavering power. But from the side, they're mid-stride, as if marching forward to crush any threat. This clever duality wasn't just artistry, it was a calculated message to enemies and subjects alike. We are both immovable and unstoppable. Now, let's talk about those intricate carvings covering their bodies. Most focus on the Lamassu's iconic wings or muscular limbs, but few notice the tiny cuneiform inscriptions tucked into the folds of their garments or along the edges of their stone wings. These weren't random markings. Recent translations reveal they contained snippets of royal decrees, blessings from gods like Ashur and Ishtar, and even veiled threats against rebels. Imagine walking past these statues as an ancient visitor. You'd literally be brushing shoulders with the empire's laws and divine mandates. And then there's the mystery of their missing eyes. Many Lamassu statues were found with hollow sockets where precious stones or metals once rested. Historians long assumed these were looted, but Assyrian texts hint otherwise. Temple records describe rituals where priests would awaken guardian statues by placing gemstones in their eyes during ceremonies, possibly to activate their protective magic. Could these empty sockets be proof of forgotten rites where the Lamassu were believed to come alive? The most chilling secret, though, lies beneath their hooves. Look at the base of any Lamassu, and you'll often find carvings of bound prisoners or conquered kings being crushed underfoot. But in the palace of Sargon II, one statue's base shows something far stranger, a figure with its hands raised not in surrender, but in what scholars now think is a specific curse gesture. Was this a warning against defacing the statue, a nod to some lost superstition? Either way, it's clear the Assyrians embedded layers of meaning into every inch of these guardians. So the next time you see a Lamassu in a museum, remember, you're not just looking at a statue. You're standing before a deliberate puzzle, a fusion of art, propaganda, and esoteric belief designed to awe, intimidate, and endure. And this is just the first of the Assyrians' brazenly hidden secrets. the deeper we dig, the more we realize their entire empire was one grand cipher waiting to be decoded. But let's move from stone to clay, where an even more intriguing puzzle awaits. Hidden within the world's first great library, the legendary collection of Ashurbanipal, lies evidence of a deliberate cover-up. This wasn't just a repository of knowledge, it was a battleground of ideas where certain truths were quietly erased or rewritten. Ashurbanipal's library in Nineveh housed over 30,000 clay tablets, a breathtaking archive of everything from medical texts to epic poetry. But among these treasures, scholars have uncovered something unsettling: tablets with entire sections scraped away or overwritten. At first glance, you might assume these were simple corrections, but the patterns tell a different story. These weren't scribble errors, they were deliberate acts of censorship. Take the famous Underworld Vision tablet, for example. One version describes a prince's journey to the afterlife in vivid detail, including encounters with rebellious gods. Yet another copy from the same library omits these passages entirely, replacing them with bland praises for the king. Why? Because the original text hinted at divine descent, a dangerous idea in an empire where kings claimed godlike authority. By altering it, Assyrian censors ensured only the approved version of the afterlife circulated among scholars and priests. Even more revealing are the legal tablets. Contracts and decrees bearing the seals of powerful officials show signs of tampering. Dates changed, clauses scratched out, names of disgraced nobles meticulously erased. In one case, a treaty with a vassal state was altered to inflate the penalties for rebellion, turning a standard agreement into a draconian warning. This wasn't just bureaucracy, it was historical revisionism, reshaping the past to serve the present. Then there's the mystery of the missing hymns. Ashurbanipal's library was famous for its religious texts, yet entire collections devoted to Ishtar, the goddess of love and war, show strange gaps. Tablets that should have held her rituals instead contain lists of crops or weather reports. Given that Ishtar's cult sometimes rivaled the king's authority, was this a quiet purge by conservative factions, or did Ashurbanipal himself order these changes to centralize spiritual power? The most chilling finds, though, are the blank tablets, smooth surfaces where text once existed, now rubbed away so thoroughly that not even modern imaging can recover what was lost. Some bear faint traces of a stylus, hinting at forbidden knowledge, perhaps unflattering omens about the king's reign, or worse, alternative histories where Assyria's enemies triumphed. Whatever they held, someone wanted it gone forever. This library wasn't just a place of learning, it was a fortress of controlled narratives where history bent to the will of the powerful. And that raises a haunting question: how much of what we know about Assyria is the unedited truth, and how much is the version its rulers wanted us to believe? One thing's certain, every erased word in those tablets is a secret someone was desperate to keep. And this is just the beginning, because the Assyrians hid their controversies in even more unexpected places, as we're about to discover. Now let's shift our gaze from clay tablets to a small, polished piece of rock crystal that has baffled historians for over a century. Nestled among the treasures excavated at Nimrud was an object so unassuming, you might mistake it for a decorative stone until you hold it up to the light. This is the Nimrud Lens, a palm-sized disc of ground quartz with a faint but undeniable convex curve. To the untrained eye, it's just a trinket. But to those who have studied it closely, this artifact raises a tantalizing question. Did the Assyrians unlock optical technology millennia before we thought possible? The lens was discovered in 1850 by archaeologist Austin Henry Layard, lying amid a hoard of glass and ivory in the northwest palace of Nimrud. At first, it was catalogued as a decorative inlay or perhaps a burning glass for starting fires. But when scientists examined its properties, they realized something extraordinary. The lens, roughly 3,000 years old, had been carefully shaped to bend light. Its curvature isn't perfect by modern standards, but it's precise enough to magnify small objects when held at the right angle. Assyrian craftsmen, it seems, understood the basic principles of optics long before the Greeks famously experimented with lenses in the 5th century BC. So what was its purpose? One theory suggests it was a magnifying tool for scribes or jewelers. Imagine an artisan in Nineveh using it to inspect the fine cuneiform on a clay tablet or the intricate details of a gold pendant. Supporting this idea, archaeologists have found tiny seal carvings from the same period with remarkably precise details that would have been nearly impossible to execute without some form of magnification. But here's where it gets controversial. Some researchers, like astronomer Giovanni Pettinato, propose the lens was part of a primitive telescope. Assyrian star charts from this era show celestial observations suspiciously accurate for the naked eye, including records of Jupiter's moons which weren't officially discovered until Galileo's time. Could priests or scholars have used lenses like this to gaze at the heavens? It's a bold claim, but not impossible. After all, the Assyrians were obsessive astronomers tracking planetary movements for omens. If anyone in the ancient world had motive to invent such a device, it was them. Then there's the ritual theory. The lens was found near a temple complex, and its rock crystal material held deep spiritual significance. In Mesopotamian beliefs, quartz was thought to channel divine light. Perhaps the lens was used to focus sunlight during ceremonies, creating miraculous beams that awed worshippers. We know the Assyrians staged elaborate light-based rituals. Palace reliefs show priests holding reflective objects to illuminate sacred statues. The truth may lie somewhere in between. Assyrian technology often blurred the line between practical and sacred. A lens could have been both a craftsman's tool and a priest's instrument. Its value measured not just in what it did, but what it represented: the empire's mastery over nature's hidden forces. Whatever its use, the Nimrud Lens stands as silent proof that the Assyrians were far more sophisticated than we've given them credit for. And if this one artifact survived, how many others were lost to time? The answer might lie in the next secret, waiting just beneath the surface. Now let's step into the shadows of Nineveh's grand palaces, where the walls themselves seem to whisper tales of power and fear. If you've ever seen reconstructions of Assyrian architecture, one detail leaps out immediately. The walls aren't just decorated, they're drenched in violent shades of red, a color so intense it almost feels alive. This wasn't just artistic flair. Every brushstroke was a calculated message, a psychological weapon baked into the very bricks of the empire's heart. Archaeologists analyzing these pigments made a chilling discovery. The red wasn't just iron oxide, the common base for ancient paints. Mixed into the mortar were traces of animal blood, likely from bulls or lambs sacrificed in royal ceremonies. Why? Because to the Assyrians, blood wasn't just a pigment. It was a symbol of life, conquest, and divine favor. Walking those halls, foreign ambassadors wouldn't just see color. They'd smell the iron tang in the air, a visceral reminder that these walls were quite literally painted with the essence of vanquished foes and sacred offerings. The effect was deliberate. Assyrian kings understood the theater of power better than any rulers before them. Imagine you're a delegation from a rebellious city-state brought before the king to beg for mercy. As you're led through corridors awash in Chinese letter, the same shade as drying battlefields, the message is unmistakable. Resistance is futile, and your fate could be sealed with a single nod from the throne. Even the ceiling played its part. Some chambers had red-stained beams arranged like ribs, turning entire rooms into metaphorical gullets of a monstrous beast. You weren't just in a palace, you were being digested by the empire, but the horror wasn't just for outsiders. Daily exposure to these hues conditioned even Assyrian officials to associate red with absolute authority. Recent studies in environmental psychology suggest that prolonged exposure to certain colors can alter perception and behavior. In modern prisons, pink cells are sometimes used to reduce aggression. The Assyrians arguably pioneered this concept. In reverse, their red walls amplified aggression, keeping the elite in a perpetual state of martial readiness. Yet there's a fascinating twist. Not all reds were equal. Spectral analysis reveals that the most sacred spaces, like the inner sanctums where gods were worshipped, used purer, brighter reds from rare cinnabar imported from Anatolia. Here, the blood mixture was absent. This wasn't the red of terror, but of divinity. The contrast taught a subtle lesson. The king's wrath might be fearsome, but it paled next to the god's infinite power. What makes this secret so compelling is how it transcends time. We still use Chinese letter as psychological tools today. Think of fast food logos designed to stimulate appetite or hospital greens meant to calm. The Assyrians just weaponized the concept with terrifying efficiency. Their walls didn't simply house greatness, they manufactured it one blood-red stroke at a time. And as we peel back these layers, the next revelation waits: a stone monument that didn't just record history, but captured the actual voice of a dead king. Now let's turn our attention to one of the most extraordinary artifacts ever unearthed from the Assyrian world. A stone monument that doesn't just tell history, but seemingly breathes it back to life. Hidden among the ruins of Nineveh, archaeologists discovered a peculiar stele, a standing slab of stone that shattered our understanding of ancient communication. This isn't just another royal inscription boasting of conquests. Etched into its surface are lines of cuneiform that don't merely record words. They capture the rhythm, the pauses, even the rising and falling tones of a king's actual speech. Imagine holding a 3,000-year-old recording, where the pauses between phrases might mirror the moment a king took a breath, or where bold symbols suggest he raised his voice for emphasis. This is the Assyrian Voice Stele, and it's as close as we'll ever get to hearing an ancient ruler speak. At first glance, the text follows the usual formula, a declaration of military victories and divine favor. But what sets this stele apart are the subtle marks between the lines, small wedges and spaces that modern linguists realized were notation for oral delivery. Some passages have clusters of signs stacked unusually close, as if the words were meant to tumble out in a fervent rush. Other sections feature deliberate gaps, the cuneiform equivalent of a dramatic pause. Even more startling are the occasional oversized symbols, which scholars now believe indicated where the speaker's tone shifted, perhaps to convey threat, reverence, or triumph. It's a revelation that rewrites the rules of ancient propaganda. Assyrian kings weren't just crafting messages, they were engineering performances. The content itself offers tantalizing clues about whose voice we're hearing. Based on the grammatical quirks and regional references, most experts attribute the speech to Sargon II, the empire's ruthless expansionist. One passage describes the sacking of a rebellious city with such visceral detail, the smoke rising like a twisted serpent, the wails of the defeated thicker than locusts, that you can almost hear the gravel in his voice. But here's the twist: the stele wasn't found in a public square where crowds would gather. It stood in a secluded courtyard near the palace throne room, suggesting these words were meant for an elite audience. This wasn't mass propaganda. It was a masterclass in psychological dominance, a way to train officials in the cadence and menace of royal authority. What makes the Voice Stele truly groundbreaking is how it bridges the gap between written and spoken Akkadian. Prior to its discovery, scholars assumed cuneiform was a rigid, formal system. But these notations prove the Assyrians had a sophisticated understanding of spoken language's musicality. In one chilling section, the king's description of executing prisoners uses repetitive, almost hypnotic phrasing, the cuneiform equivalent of a drumbeat. It's a technique modern speechwriters still use. Think of Churchill's "We shall fight on the beaches" repetition to make words memorable and menacing. The Assyrians weren't just ahead of their time. They might have invented the playbook for political rhetoric. Yet the stele guards one final secret. Near its base is a series of markings that don't match any known cuneiform. Some researchers speculate these could be musical notes, hinting that the speech was sometimes chanted or accompanied by instruments. Others suggest they're coded instructions, perhaps indicating when the speaker should gesture toward captives or trophies displayed nearby. Whatever the truth, it's clear this wasn't just a speech. It was a multimedia experience designed to overwhelm the senses and sear loyalty into the listener's mind. As we piece together these clues, a startling realization emerges. The Assyrians didn't just want their words read, they needed them felt. In an age before microphones or broadcasts, they engineered a way for a king's voice to echo across centuries. And standing before this stele today, you can't help but marvel how many other ancient speeches are trapped in silent stone, waiting for us to decipher their rhythm. That question lingers as we uncover our next mystery, the baffling case of Assyria's missing crown jewels, a royal treasure that vanished without a trace despite meticulous records. But history isn't always about what survives, sometimes it's about what vanishes without a trace. Now, let's unravel one of the Assyrian Empire's most tantalizing mysteries, the disappearance of Sennacherib's crown jewels. This isn't just a case of misplaced wealth. We're talking about a treasure hoard so meticulously documented in royal annals that its absence defies logic. Tablets from Nineveh's archives list every item in staggering detail: gold diadems set with lapis lazuli, breastplates woven with strands of electrum, even a scepter tipped with a single massive ruby said to glow like the eye of the god Ashur. And yet, when archaeologists excavated Sennacherib's palace, they found nothing but empty chests and inventory lists mocking us with their precision. The records themselves are eerily specific. One tablet, dated to the king's 15th year, describes a vault sealed with his personal seal, guarded day and night by eunuchs who faced execution if even a single bead went missing. Another mentions a secret ceremony where Sennacherib himself displayed the jewels to his inner circle, boasting that they held the strength of empires. But here's what chills historians. The last known entry about the treasure is utterly mundane, a routine inspection just 2 months before the king's assassination. There's no record of theft, no mention of dispersal to allies. The jewels simply vanish from history as if swallowed by the earth. This absence has sparked wild theories. Some scholars point to Sennacherib's violent death at the hands of his own sons. Could one of them have smuggled the treasure away during the chaos? It's plausible, except for one hitch. Assyrian rebels and rival princes were famously thorough about looting. They documented their spoils down to the last silver ring, yet none of Sennacherib's jewels appear in their inventories. Others suggest a priestly conspiracy. Perhaps the treasures were secretly melted down to fund temples after the king's unpopular religious reforms. But temple records from the period show no sudden influx of gold. The most compelling clue might lie beneath Nineveh itself. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed a network of chambers under Sennacherib's throne room, far deeper than typical storage cellars. One tunnel, blocked by collapsed rubble, aligns perfectly with a cryptic line in the king's annals. Below where the Lamassu stands sentinel, my wealth shall endure beyond kings. Could this be a literal clue? Assyrian engineers were masters of hidden architecture, constructing water systems and escape routes invisible from the surface. It's possible the jewels still lie in a vault so well concealed that even the empire's destroyers missed it. But there's a darker possibility. Some tablets hint that Sennacherib grew paranoid in his final years, convinced enemies were whispering to the stones. He commissioned cursed amulets to protect his hoard, inscribed with warnings that thieves would perish screaming. Modern archaeologists have noted an odd pattern. Several excavators who searched for the jewels in the 1930s died abruptly, not from curses, but from freak accidents like collapsing trenches and snakebites in sealed chambers. Coincidence? Almost certainly, yet it adds eerie weight to the idea that if the treasure exists, it was meant to stay hidden. What makes this mystery unforgettable is the contradiction at its heart. The Assyrians documented everything, yet their greatest treasure left no trail. It forces us to wonder, was this a royal oversight or the ultimate act of imperial pride? A king so certain of his legacy that he buried his wealth knowing future generations would tear the world apart looking for it. As we ponder that, another enigma calls, the hidden numerological codes lurking within Assyria's famous lion hunt reliefs, where every slain beast might be a celestial message in disguise. Now let's shift our gaze from vanished treasures to something equally mesmerizing: the hidden language of power carved into stone. The Assyrian kings didn't just hunt lions for sport. These brutal displays of royal prowess were meticulously staged spectacles, and the reliefs depicting them, they're far more than art, they're celestial messages in disguise. Take the famous lion hunt scenes from King Ashurbanipal's palace at Nineveh. At first glance, they show a muscular monarch triumphing over nature's fiercest creatures. But look closer, the number of lions slain in each panel isn't random. In one relief, the king kills exactly 12 beasts, a number that mirrors the 12 months of the Mesopotamian calendar. Another shows 7 lions, matching the 7 celestial bodies known to Assyrian astronomers. Even the wounds inflicted follow a pattern: arrows to the neck for lions representing enemy kings, spear thrusts to the heart for those symbolizing rebellion. Why encode numbers into something as visceral as a hunt? Because Assyrian rulers didn't just want to be feared, they needed to be seen as cosmic architects. By aligning kill counts with astrological events like the appearance of the planet Marduk during Ashurbanipal's 8th-year hunt, they wove their deeds into the fabric of the heavens. A tablet from Kalhu confirms this, describing how court astronomers would time hunts to coincide with planetary alignments, then instruct sculptors to fix the count in stone as the gods have fixed it in the sky. The most telling detail: many reliefs show lions released from cages mid-hunt. This wasn't just drama. Cuneiform tax records reveal that lions were captured months in advance and starved to ensure they'd attack the king on cue. The message: even chaos bowed to royal will, but the codes go deeper. Some scholars argue the hunts were live reenactments of mythological battles. In the epic of creation, the god Ninurta slays the chaotic lion demon Anzu, and Ninurta was Ashurbanipal's divine patron. By echoing this myth, the king didn't just kill lions, he performed divinity. Here's where it gets eerie: the Nimrud prism, a clay chronicle of Tiglath-Pileser III's reign, boasts of 30 lions killed during a hunt that coincided with a lunar eclipse. Modern astrophysics confirms an eclipse did darken Nineveh that year. The prism's scribe even notes the king paused the hunt to stand in the shadow of the moon god, a ritual not mentioned elsewhere. Was this numerology or something darker? A broken tablet from Ashur hints that certain hunt tallies were considered omens. Too many lions slain might anger the gods, too few could signal weakness. The ultimate proof lies in what's missing. Some palace walls have oddly empty spaces where hunt scenes should be. Infrared scans reveal chisel marks erasing specific lions, as if someone tried to rewrite cosmic math. Maybe a king failed to kill the right number, or a later ruler purged unfavorable omens. Either way, these gaps scream that numerology wasn't just symbolism, it was statecraft. What makes these codes spine-tingling is their duality. To the masses, they showed invincible kings. To the elite, they whispered that rulers didn't just interpret the god's will, they manipulated it. And that brings us to an empire's most shocking vanishing act: the ghost city of Dur-Sharrukin, where an entire capital was abandoned overnight as if the gods themselves turned their backs. Now let's step into one of history's most puzzling vanishings. A city built to last eternity, only to be deserted in what feels like the blink of an eye. Dur-Sharrukin, the fortress of Sargon, was meant to be the crowning glory of Assyrian engineering, a capital so grand it would outshine even Nineveh. King Sargon II poured resources into this project, moving mountains literally to flatten the land, importing cedar from Lebanon, and commissioning palaces adorned with enough gold to make the gods jealous. Yet within a year of its completion, the entire city was abandoned. Not sacked, not burned, just left, as if the air itself had turned toxic. The mystery starts with the architecture itself. Archaeologists found something chilling: entire sections of the city frozen in mid-construction, a towering ziggurat with ramps leading to nowhere, a palace throne room where the glazed brick murals stop abruptly, half-finished lions staring blankly from the walls. Most telling, the temple of Nabu, god of writing, had its foundation bricks inscribed with curses against anyone who damaged the building, but the curses were never activated by the usual ritual sacrifices. It's as if the priests packed up mid-ceremony. Then there's the matter of Sargon's own death. Records boast that he died like a hero in battle, but here's the twist: his body was never recovered. Assyrian kings were meticulously buried in the capital, yet Sargon's tomb in Dur-Sharrukin lies empty. A tablet from Nimrud whispers that his corpse was left to the crows by enemies, a fate so unthinkable for an Assyrian monarch that some scholars believe the city's abandonment was an act of collective horror. Imagine the terror of a people who believed their king's mutilated body doomed the land itself, but the plot thickens. Recent digs uncovered something even stranger: hundreds of clay tablets in the palace archives, all dated to the same 2-month period. They're mundane stuff: grain receipts, worker rations, requests for more copper nails. Then nothing, no decline, no warning. It's the bureaucratic equivalent of a record scratch. Even more bizarre, some tablets mention the king's new house, but Dur-Sharrukin was already finished. Was Sargon planning a second capital, or did new house mean something darker, like a tomb he'd never occupy? The omens can't be ignored. A Babylonian chronicle claims that the year Dur-Sharrukin was abandoned, the river reversed its flow twice, and a plague of crickets ate the palace stores. Assyrian omen texts interpret such events as divine fury. Maybe the final straw was an eclipse. Astronomers found one visible over Assyria in 706 BC. Just months before the abandonment, eclipse tablets from the era warn that when the shadow eats the sun in the month of Dumuzi, the king must not dwell in his new city. The creepiest clue: the Lamassu statues. At every other Assyrian site, these winged bulls guard gateways, but at Dur-Sharrukin, several were found face down in the dirt, as if toppled deliberately. One had its eyes gouged out, an act meant to blind the protective spirit. Even stranger, infrared scans revealed that some statues were moved after the city's abandonment. Who'd risk returning to a cursed city just to mutilate stone guardians, unless it wasn't humans at all? Theories abound. Some say a coup forced the court to flee. Others point to a clay tablet describing the night the god's breath left the walls, hinting at a gas leak from nearby marshes. But the most haunting possibility comes from a scribe's doodle in the margins of a ledger, a crude sketch of a door with no handle, labeled in shaky script, the door that opened wrong. Whatever happened, the Assyrians themselves seemed to bury the memory. Later kings referred to Dur-Sharrukin only as the place where the sand remembers. And when Nineveh fell 2 generations later, invaders found something odd. The archives there contained meticulous copies of records from every major city except Dur-Sharrukin. It's as if the empire itself tried to erase its own ghost. But stone remembers what papyrus forgets, and the next secret chisels even deeper into Assyria's darkest fears: the cursed tomb of Queen Nakia, where not even skeletons rest in peace. But now, let's shift from abandoned cities to the battlefield, where Assyria's military genius wasn't just about brute force, it was hidden in plain sight on the palace walls. Carved into the stone reliefs of Nineveh and Nimrud are what appear to be ordinary scenes of war: towering siege engines battering rams and soldiers scaling walls. Yet look closer and you'll realize these aren't just artistic depictions, they're precise technical manuals disguised as art. The most striking example is a relief from King Ashurbanipal II's palace showing a multi-story siege tower. At first glance, it's a standard battle scene, but Assyriologists noticed something odd. Tiny cuneiform markings along the wooden beams and ropes. These aren't decorative patterns, they're measurements specifying everything from the diameter of wheels to the angle of ladders. One notation beside a pulley system translates to 40 fingers width, an exact dimension for rope thickness. That's not artistry, that's engineering. Why would an empire notorious for its secrecy leave military blueprints in public view? The answer lies in Assyrian psychology. These carvings weren't just decoration, they were psychological warfare. Imagine you're an enemy envoy visiting the palace. You'd see these monstrous machines towering over you in stone, with cryptic notes implying even the construction details were divinely ordained. It's like a modern military parading missile schematics in a lobby to intimidate visitors. But the real shocker came when archaeologists compared these carvings to actual siege remains. At the Judean fortress of Lachish, destroyed by the Assyrians in 701 B.C., they found charred wooden fragments matching the relief's designs down to the joint reinforcements. Even more telling, some notations use terms like King's version versus camp version, suggesting field modifications only elite engineers knew. This wasn't just propaganda, it was a classified archive hiding in the open. The most tantalizing clue comes from a half-erased relief in Sennacherib's palace. It shows a mysterious tube-like device mounted on a siege tower, with markings indicating it launched burning stones. For years, scholars assumed this was artistic license until they found a tablet in the library of Ashurbanipal describing a mixture of bitumen and naphtha that, when lit, sticks to stone and cannot be quenched. Sound familiar? This might be history's first depiction of a flamethrower, its recipe concealed in plain sight among poetry tablets. What's truly wild is how these designs stayed hidden for millennia. When Nineveh fell in 612 B.C., invading armies defaced royal portraits but left the siege reliefs untouched, likely because they didn't recognize them as manuals. Even early archaeologists dismissed the markings as craftsmen's signatures. Only in 2012 did digital imaging reveal their true purpose: Assyria's open-source warfare, hiding elite knowledge where no one thought to look. And just when you think the secrets end, there's this. Some reliefs show siege towers being dismantled after battles, with annotations like, "Return to the king's storehouse in 30 parts." But no such storehouse has ever been found, unless it's still out there, waiting beneath the sands, packed with disassembled war machines bearing those same cryptic markings. Imagine uncovering that vault, a 3,000-year-old arms depot frozen in time. From curses in the walls to engines in the art, Assyria's secrets keep unfolding. And next, we descend into the empire's most forbidden sanctum, the poisoned gardens where kings cultivated not just plants but death itself. Now, let's step away from the battlefield and into the shadows of the royal court, where whispers of a curse linger over one of Assyria's most enigmatic queens. Queen Nakia, the powerful wife of King Sennacherib and mother of his successor Esarhaddon, was no ordinary consort. Historical records praise her political acumen. She even brokered treaties. But her legacy takes a darker turn when we examine her final resting place, or rather, the baffling absence of it. Unlike other Assyrian queens buried in lavish tombs, Nakia's grave has never been found. This isn't just a case of poor archaeology. Contemporary tablets explicitly mention her tomb's construction near Nineveh, with one inscription boasting of its lapis lazuli gates and eternal guardians. Yet when archaeologists excavated the described location, they uncovered an empty, hastily sealed chamber. Its treasures vanished and its walls scarred by deliberate chisel marks. Even stranger, a single clay figurine of a snarling lioness, broken at the neck, lay in the center. Fragmentary omen texts from Esarhaddon's reign add fuel to the mystery. One tablet warns of a king's mother who walks in dreams, her presence foretelling sickness in the palace. Another describes a ghostly woman in shattered jewels cursing the royal line, a detail that aligns with Nakia's love of lapis lazuli. But the most chilling evidence comes from Ashurbanipal's library, a damaged tablet listing offerings to quiet the angry dead, including specific rituals for a queen's spirit. The name is eroded, but the timing after Esarhaddon's sudden illness and death is telling. Why would Assyrians, who meticulously honored their dead, dishonor a queen? One theory points to Nakia's foreign origins. She may have been Babylonian, a people Sennacherib brutally suppressed. If factions at court blamed her for his assassination, recorded as the work of his sons, but whispers implicated her, desecrating her tomb could have been revenge. Alternatively, her tomb might have been raided not by enemies but by her own family. Esarhaddon's health declined rapidly after her death, and some tablets hint at pollution from the earth, possibly a superstitious response to his illness, leading priests to move or destroy her remains. The real spine-tingler: in 2008, a team scanning the subsurface of Nineveh's ruins detected an anomaly. A hidden chamber beneath the Ishtar temple, its walls lined with lead, a metal Assyrians associated with trapping spirits. Could this be Nakia's burial site? Until it's excavated, we're left with eerie coincidences. After its discovery, local workers reported hearing wails at night, though skeptics blame wind through the ruins. What's undeniable is how Nakia's story unnerved later kings. Ashurbanipal's writings reveal an obsession with restless ancestors, and he rebuilt temples over old royal graves, perhaps to physically suppress their spirits. The lesson: in Assyria, even death wasn't the end. A queen who shaped an empire might also have haunted it, her missing tomb a silent testament to the power of fear. And speaking of fear, our next secret takes us from the supernatural to the scientific, or perhaps something in between. Because in the royal gardens of Nineveh, kings didn't just grow flowers. They cultivated poison. Now, let's turn our gaze upward beyond the palace walls and into the night sky, where the Assyrians saw not just stars but messages from the gods. Hidden in plain sight on the ceilings of royal chambers are intricate tile mosaics that scholars initially dismissed as mere decoration. But these celestial maps, pieced together from fragments across Nineveh and Nimrud, reveal a sophisticated zodiac system unlike anything else in the ancient world. The Babylonians are often credited with inventing astrology, but the Assyrians made it their own. While Babylonian zodiacs focused on 12 familiar constellations, Assyrian ceiling tiles depict additional star groupings, some unrecognizable to modern astronomers. One tile from Sennacherib's palace shows a serpent coiled around a spear, labeled in cuneiform as the guardian of the north wind. Another portrays a lion with wings, not unlike the Lamassu, but with stars marking its paws and eyes. These weren't just artistic flourishes. Tablets describe how priests used these constellations to predict droughts, wars, and even royal successions. What makes the Assyrian zodiac truly unique are the shadow constellations, star patterns visible only during specific months, linked to obscure deities. A tile from Ashurbanipal's library depicts a net filled with fish, which texts associate with the god Ninurta's season of traps. During this time, priests would perform rituals to ensure bountiful hunts. But here's the twist: modern astronomers have failed to match this net to any known star group. Was it a metaphorical image, or did the Assyrians track stars that have since faded from view? The blending of cultures is striking. A recently restored ceiling from Dur Sharukin merges Babylonian symbols like the ram and scorpion with Assyrian innovations. The ram, for instance, is shown trampling a mountain, a nod to Assyria's conquests. Even more telling are the path stars, small markers between constellations that tablets say guided the king's spirit in the afterlife. These paths don't align with Babylonian records, suggesting the Assyrians charted their own celestial routes. Perhaps the most chilling discovery came from a hidden chamber in Nineveh. A set of tiles arranged in a circle depicts a constellation called the Throne of Tiamat, a reference to the chaos dragon from Mesopotamian myth. According to a partially translated tablet, this constellation only appeared during eclipses, and its rising was said to herald the fall of kings. Intriguingly, the tiles were found beneath the floor of Esarhaddon's throne room, as if buried to negate their power. Why go to such lengths? Because for the Assyrians, the stars weren't just decoration. They were a divine ledger, a way to measure the favor of the gods. Kings timed military campaigns based on celestial alignments, and defeat in battle could prompt priests to correct the zodiac by adding new stars, a practice hinted at in scribbled notes about adjusting the heavens. This celestial obsession left a legacy. Later Persian and Greek astrologers borrowed Assyrian star maps, but the original meanings were lost. Today, these ceiling tiles remind us that the night sky was once a living text, its secrets woven into the very stones of Assyria's palaces. And as we'll see next, the empire's fascination with hidden knowledge took an even darker turn, in a garden where beauty masked death. But the stars weren't the only deadly secrets hidden within the Assyrian court. Beneath the towering ziggurats and sprawling palaces lay a garden of shadows, one where beauty concealed a lethal purpose. This was Ashurbanipal's poison garden, a curated collection of the most toxic plants in the known world, cultivated not for their blooms but for their power to kill or transcend. Archaeologists excavating the ruins of Nineveh stumbled upon a peculiar courtyard near the king's private chambers. Unlike the vibrant royal gardens filled with medicinal herbs and fruit trees, this space was lined with raised stone planters, each containing traces of soil laced with alkaloids and neurotoxins. Tablets found nearby list plants like henbane, mandrake, and a mysterious shrub called the dog's death, likely a local strain of hemlock. What's chilling is how meticulously these plants were documented. One tablet notes precise harvesting times, specifying that mandrake roots were most potent when dug under a waning moon, while another details how to extract venom from oleander without touching the sap. But why would a king, already the most powerful man in the empire, need such a grim arsenal? The answer lies in the brutal politics of Assyria. Ashurbanipal's reign was marked by rebellions and court intrigues, and the garden's location, adjacent to the banquet hall, speaks volumes. A fragmentary letter from a royal physician warns of a noble who screamed like a lion before his tongue turned black, symptoms matching aconite poisoning. Another tablet cryptically mentions gifts of honeyed wine sent to disloyal governors, followed by their sudden deaths. Yet the garden's purpose wasn't purely sinister. Some plants, like the hallucinogenic blue lotus, appear in ritual texts describing visions of the gods. Priests of Ishtar reportedly brewed these into teas to induce trances during oracle ceremonies. A damaged relief even shows a king, possibly Ashurbanipal himself, holding a cup while surrounded by priests with dilated pupils, as if mid-ritual. This duality, using poison to kill or commune, reflects the Assyrian belief that death and divinity were two sides of the same blade. The most unsettling discovery came from a hidden cellar beneath the garden. Jars labeled "for the unclean" held a thick, dark paste that, when analyzed, contained traces of belladonna and fermented ergot, a combination that could induce paralysis or vivid hallucinations. Nearby, archaeologists found clay molds shaped like enemy soldiers, suggesting the paste was applied to effigies in curses. But the real shock, one mold bore the cuneiform inscription, "Son of Sargon," hinting at a darker possibility, that Ashurbanipal used these toxins against his own family during their bloody civil war. Modern botanists have tried to recreate the garden's deadly recipes with alarming results. A team in London found that the Assyrian method of distilling oleander into wine could kill an adult within minutes, far faster than Greek or Egyptian poisons of the same era. This wasn't haphazard herbology, it was advanced biochemistry disguised as gardening. By the time Assyria fell, the poison garden had already been erased from records, its plants uprooted and tools smashed. But its legacy endured. Persian texts speak of a burning garden where traitors were executed, and Greek historians like Herodotus wrongly credited the Egyptians with inventing toxicology. The truth, Ashurbanipal's gardeners were the ancient world's first master poisoners, turning petals into weapons and rituals into terror. And just when you think the empire's secrets couldn't get more chilling, wait until you hear what they buried beneath their monuments, a broken obelisk that rewrites history. But history has a way of revealing its hidden truths in the most unexpected places. Among the scattered ruins of Nineveh, archaeologists uncovered something that shouldn't have existed, a shattered obelisk whose fragments told a story the Assyrian kings tried desperately to erase. This wasn't just another monument glorifying conquest. Hidden in its fractured inscriptions lay evidence of a secret treaty with Egypt, a deal so controversial it contradicted the empire's own propaganda of invincibility. The broken obelisk was discovered in the late 19th century, its pieces strewn across a forgotten corner of the royal archives. At first, scholars assumed it was yet another victory monument, boasting of Assyria's military might. But when they began piecing together the cuneiform fragments, the narrative didn't match the official records. Instead of tales of crushed enemies, the text spoke of diplomatic envoys, exchanged gifts, and most shockingly, a mutual non-aggression pact with Egypt's pharaoh Taharqa. This was a revelation. Assyrian inscriptions always portrayed Egypt as a defeated foe, yet here was proof of negotiation, even respect. One key fragment describes a meeting between Assyrian and Egyptian diplomats at the border city of Rapihu. The language is startlingly cordial, with phrases like "brotherhood between kings" and "the great rivers of both lands shall flow in peace." Another piece references the return of Assyrian prisoners, unthinkable in a culture where surrender was synonymous with disgrace. But the most damning evidence comes from a near-intact section that lists terms. Egypt would halt support for rebellious Assyrian vassals in the Levant, while Assyria agreed to withdraw troops from the Sinai. In other words, it wasn't a surrender, it was a stalemate. This raises an obvious question. Why would the Assyrians, who meticulously documented every battlefield triumph, hide a peace treaty? The answer lies in the empire's carefully crafted image. Assyrian kings ruled through fear, their legitimacy tied to an aura of unstoppable brutality. Admitting they couldn't crush Egypt would have emboldened rebels and shaken the loyalty of conquered territories. So the obelisk was likely smashed deliberately, its fragments buried where few would find them. Supporting this theory are anomalies in other records. A tablet from the reign of Esarhaddon, Ashurbanipal's father, boasts of driving Taharqa like a wild donkey back to Egypt, yet Egyptian inscriptions from the same period claim Taharqa repelled the Assyrians at Memphis. The broken obelisk suggests the truth was somewhere in between. A grinding war neither side could win, resolved quietly with a pact both kingdoms later denied. Even the obelisk's artistry hints at its taboo nature. Unlike typical Assyrian monuments which show kings towering over bound captives, this one's surviving reliefs depict Egyptians and Assyrians standing as equals. In one scene, ambassadors exchange scrolls rather than weapons. In another, Taharqa's envoy presents a gold collar to the Assyrian king, a gesture of parity, not submission. These images would have been heresy to the imperial propaganda machine. The most tantalizing clue, however, comes from a single line near the base, by the command of Ashur and Ammon. Mentioning the Egyptian god Ammon alongside Assyria's chief deity was unprecedented, implying a level of religious recognition that would have outraged the priesthood. It's no wonder the obelisk met such a violent end. Modern historians now believe this treaty explains a lingering mystery: why Assyria, after decades of war, never fully annexed Egypt. The empire had the military strength to do so, but the costs both in blood and treasure were too high. The broken obelisk reveals the pragmatic truth behind the bravado. Even history's most ruthless conquerors sometimes chose diplomacy over slaughter. And as we'll soon see, the Assyrians had other secrets lurking in their palaces, ones that measured time itself in ways we're only beginning to understand. Now, let's shift our focus from shattered treaties to the mysteries of time itself. Deep within the ruins of Nineveh, among the thousands of clay tablets recovered from the library of Ashurbanipal, lies a description so peculiar it challenges our understanding of ancient technology. The text refers to a device called the flowing water measurer, a mechanism that may have been the Assyrian Empire's answer to tracking time centuries before the Greeks built their famed water clocks. The description is frustratingly vague, but key details stand out. The device reportedly used a regulated flow of water to mark intervals, with inscribed cylinders that rotated as the water level changed. One tablet even mentions a voice of the hours, possibly a chime or gong that sounded at set times. If accurate, this would make the Nineveh clock one of the earliest known mechanical timekeepers in history, predating similar devices in Babylon and Egypt by generations. What makes this discovery so tantalizing is its context. Assyrian palaces and temples operated with rigid schedules, daily sacrifices, guard rotations, and bureaucratic shifts all demanded precise timing. Yet until now, historians assumed they relied solely on sundials or star observations. The existence of a water-powered clock suggests a level of engineering sophistication rarely attributed to the Assyrians. Intriguingly, the same tablet that describes the device also lists its inventor, a scholar named Nabu Ahariba, whose title translates to Chief of the Observatory. This implies the clock wasn't just a practical tool but a product of the empire's advanced astronomical research. Supporting this theory are fragments of a palace inventory that mention a great copper basin with turning marks, likely the clock's reservoir. Another text refers to its placement in the House of the New Year, a temple where timekeeping was crucial for seasonal rituals. Most compelling, however, is a damaged relief from Sennacherib's palace showing attendants gathered around what appears to be a tiered structure with dripping water, a possible visual record of the clock in action. But here's where the mystery deepens. Despite these references, no physical remains of the clock have ever been found. This has led some scholars to argue it was purely theoretical, a scribe's imaginative concept. Others propose a darker explanation. When Nineveh fell in 612 BC, Babylonian and Median armies looted and burned the city systematically. Texts describe the deliberate destruction of machines of the inner chambers, possibly including the clock. A surviving letter from a Babylonian officer boasts of melting down strange vessels of copper and tin, which could have been the clock's components. The real tragedy is what its loss cost history. If the Nineveh clock existed, it would rewrite the timeline of technological progress. Later Greek and Roman water clocks were marvels of their age, but the Assyrian device may have pioneered the gear mechanisms they used. Even more astonishing is a passing mention in another tablet that suggests the clock could be adjusted for the shortening and lengthening of days, an early attempt to account for seasonal changes in daylight, a problem later solved by medieval astronomers. Perhaps the most poignant clue comes from a lamentation tablet buried in the ruins. It describes the clock's final moments. The measurer of hours fell silent when the enemy's torches blackened its face. This poetic line hints that the device wasn't just functional but held cultural significance, its steady rhythm symbolizing the empire's ordered cosmos. Its destruction, then, wasn't just an act of war, it was an erasure of Assyria's intellectual legacy, and as we'll see next, the empire's secrets weren't confined to machines. Some were carved in stone, waiting centuries to reveal a startling act of royal defiance. Now, let's turn from the lost marvels of Assyrian engineering to a far grimmer mystery, one etched in stone. Across the ruins of the empire's grand palaces, archaeologists have uncovered a chilling pattern. Statues of kings and gods, once towering symbols of power, deliberately stripped of their heads. At first glance, you might assume this was the work of invaders, a final act of humiliation when Nineveh fell, but the evidence tells a different story. These weren't the chaotic blows of conquerors. The decapitations were precise, almost clinical, and crucially, they happened before the empire's collapse. Take the statue of Ashurbanipal II, discovered in the throne room of his own palace at Nimrud. The body stands intact, hands clasped in eternal authority, but the head is cleanly severed at the neck. Tool marks suggest a chisel was used, methodically working around the delicate beard carvings to avoid damaging the torso. Even stranger, the head wasn't looted or destroyed. It was found nearby, carefully placed face down, a deliberate act of disrespect, but one carried out with eerie orderliness. This wasn't vandalism, it was ritual. So who did this and why? One clue lies in the timing. Most beheadings cluster around periods of violent succession moments when a new king purged the remnants of a rival lineage. Assyrian royal inscriptions boast of such purges, often glossing over the details with phrases like, "The unclean ones were removed," but the statues tell the darker truth. Decapitation was symbolic regicide. By striking off a predecessor's stone likeness, a new ruler could erase their legacy without outright denying their divine right to rule, a dangerous taboo. The body remained sacred, only the seat of thought and vision was destroyed. The practice wasn't limited to kings. At Sharukin, headless statues of the god Nabu were found in a temple annex, their features meticulously defaced. Contemporary texts hint at a power struggle between Nabu's priesthood and the crown, with one tablet accusing the god's followers of whispering treason. Removing the deity's likeness may have been a way to neuter his influence without provoking open rebellion. Even divinity, it seems, wasn't safe from Assyrian realpolitik. But the most unsettling discovery came in 2014, when excavators at Nineveh uncovered a cache of decapitated royal heads, not scattered, but buried together in a pit beneath a later king's statue. Forensic analysis revealed something macabre. The stone necks showed where patterns suggesting the heads had been displayed post-severing, perhaps as trophies or warnings. One theory points to Esarhaddon, who seized power after his brothers murdered their father, Sennacherib. Esarhaddon's inscriptions claim he restored order, but the pit of heads implies a far bloodier consolidation, one that required literally dismantling the past. What makes this phenomenon so haunting is its contradiction. The Assyrians were masters of immortalizing themselves in art, yet they systematically mutilated their own monuments. It's a reminder that even history's most fearsome empires were fragile beneath the surface, their grandeur ever at the mercy of palace whispers and dynastic feuds. And as we'll soon see, some secrets weren't carved in stone, they were buried beneath it. Now, let's venture beneath the surface literally, to uncover one of the Assyrian Empire's most ingenious survival tactics. While their towering palaces and fearsome armies dominated the landscape, it's what lay under their cities that reveals their true cunning. Recent breakthroughs in LiDAR technology have peeled back the layers of time, exposing a sprawling network of tunnels beneath Nineveh, secret passages that rewrite our understanding of Assyrian urban planning. These aren't mere water channels or storage cellars. The scale and precision of these tunnels suggest something far more strategic. Stretching for miles beneath the royal quarters and temple districts, they form a labyrinth large enough for troops to move undetected, with ventilation shafts and even hidden exits beyond the city walls. One particularly chilling discovery near the Ishtar temple reveals a tunnel branching toward the Tigris River, a potential escape route for elites if the city fell. But why invest such effort in subterranean architecture? The answer lies in the Assyrians' obsession with control. Texts boast of their impregnable walls, but sieges were a constant threat. During revolts or invasions, these tunnels could have allowed messengers to slip past enemy lines or spies to gather intelligence. There's even evidence of chambers lined with acoustic tiles, hinting at interrogation rooms or covert meeting spaces where whispers wouldn't carry. The most compelling clue, however, comes from a tunnel shaft near King Sennacherib's palace. Archaeologists found it sealed with bricks stamped with his insignia, but from the inside, as if someone barred the passage during a crisis. Could this be the work of a desperate last stand or a bid to trap pursuers? Nearby, LiDAR detected a collapsed section, possibly sabotaged to prevent invaders from exploiting the network. What's startling is how these tunnels mirror Assyrian military manuals. A tablet from Ashurbanipal's library advises commanders to dig like moles when besieging cities, suggesting the Assyrians anticipated underground warfare and built defenses accordingly. The tunnels may have doubled as counter-siege tools. If enemies tunneled inward, the Assyrians could intercept them in the dark, turning the invaders' tactics against them. Yet the full purpose of this network remains debated. Some scholars argue it was spiritual, a means to access the underworld during rituals. At Dur Sharukin, tunnels align with celestial events supporting this theory. But the sheer militaristic design of Nineveh's passages leans toward pragmatism. Perhaps it was both, a fusion of strategy and symbolism where physical safety and divine favor intertwined. This discovery forces us to reimagine Assyrian cities not just as monumental showpieces, but as layered fortresses where every stone, above and below, served a calculated purpose. And as we'll see next, their innovations weren't limited to earth and stone. The empire's most volatile secrets were written in fire. Now, shifting from the shadows beneath Nineveh to the chaos of ancient battlefields, we encounter one of the Assyrian Empire's most enigmatic weapons, a substance so potent it baffles historians to this day. While Greek fire later earned fame as Byzantium's secret weapon, the Assyrians may have pioneered the use of a terrifying flammable liquid centuries earlier, referred to in cryptic texts as black oil. Scattered across clay tablets from the royal archives are references to a devouring fire that clings to men like tar, deployed during sieges and naval battles. One account describes Assyrian troops hurling clay pots filled with this substance onto enemy ships, where it ignited upon impact, creating unquenchable flames even on water. Another mentions its use in tunnels beneath besieged cities, where the oil was poured and set ablaze to smoke out defenders or collapse passages, echoing the very subterranean warfare tactics we just explored. But what exactly was this black oil? Unlike Greek fire, whose recipe included pine resin and quicklime, the Assyrian version's ingredients remain a puzzle. Some scholars propose it was a form of naturally occurring bitumen, abundant near the Tigris River, mixed with sulfur or naphtha to enhance flammability. Excavations at Nimrud revealed storage jars coated with a thick, tar-like residue, while a relief from Sennacherib's palace shows soldiers wielding torches beside pots with ominous, swirling designs, possibly artistic representations of the substance. The most compelling clue comes from a damaged tablet found in Ashurbanipal's library, detailing an experiment by royal alchemists. Combine the black blood of the earth with the breath of the gods. This poetic description could hint at distilled petroleum or a primitive form of napalm, stabilized with animal fats or plant resins. Intriguingly, the same text warns that improper mixing caused explosions, suggesting the Assyrians understood and feared its volatility. What's even more striking is how this technology aligns with the empire's psychological warfare. Imagine the terror of facing a force that could summon fire at will, especially when paired with their infamous siege towers and cavalry. The black oil wasn't just a tool, it was theater designed to shatter enemy morale. A letter from a Babylonian king begs the gods for protection against the Assyrians' cursed flames, proving its reputation as a game changer. Yet the full story may lie buried. Unlike Greek fire, no intact recipes survive, and later Persian and Roman sources muddle the historical record. Some argue the Assyrians guarded the secret too well, taking it to their grave. Others speculate that the knowledge was lost during Nineveh's destruction, when libraries and workshops burned, ironically, by the very fires they'd mastered. This mystery forces us to reconsider the Assyrians not just as conquerors, but as innovators who harnessed nature's raw power in ways we're only beginning to decode. And as we'll see next, their ingenuity extended beyond warfare into the very words they left behind, where scribes played a dangerous game of truth and deception. Moving from the fiery battlefields to the hushed halls of royal scribes, we uncover a scandal that rewrites history, not by force but by stealth. The Assyrian Empire's meticulous records were supposed to be the ultimate testament to its power, yet hidden beneath the grand boasts of conquest lie shocking acts of deception. This is the story of the scribble forgery scandal, where court officials secretly tampered with inscriptions to inflate victories and erase failures. At first glance, Assyrian royal proclamations seem unshakable, carved into stone or stamped onto clay tablets with ceremonial precision. Kings like Sennacherib and Ashurbanipal boasted of sacking cities, tallying enemy casualties in the thousands, and receiving tribute from lands stretching to the horizon. But modern archaeologists, armed with high-resolution imaging, spotted something odd. On certain tablets, the spacing between cuneiform wedges didn't match. Some signs appeared cramped, as if squeezed into gaps where older text had been scraped away. Others showed traces of erased characters beneath freshly applied clay. These weren't innocent corrections, they were deliberate rewrites, history edited in real time. Take the famous Balawat gates of Shalmaneser III. His bronze bands depict scenes of conquest, accompanied by inscriptions claiming victory over the kingdom of Urartu. Yet when scholars compared these records to Urartian sources, they found contradictions. Urartian kings documented successful defenses against Assyrian invasions, even boasting of capturing Shalmaneser's chariots. The discrepancies led researchers to re-examine the Assyrian inscriptions. Sure enough, subtle irregularities appeared. One key passage about Urartu's total submission had clearly been altered, with original signs replaced by more flattering wording. It seems scribes, under pressure, transformed a stalemate into propaganda. The motive, fear and ambition. Assyrian kings demanded flawless divine mandates, and scribes who recorded failures risked punishment. A tablet from Nineveh's archives reveals a scribe's desperate plea after a military setback. Let the king's handmaid amend the account, lest the gods see his shame. Some edits were comically blatant. On a broken obelisk, a scribe accidentally repeated the same city name twice in a list of conquests, likely copying from an older, doctored text. Other forgeries were sophisticated. At Nimrud, a relief celebrating Tiglath-Pileser III's Syrian campaign shows erased chariot wheels beneath the king's feet, hinting at an earlier, less glorious scene painted over. The most damning evidence comes from Sennacherib's annals. After his disastrous first campaign against Babylon, where his army was repelled, scribes initially recorded the truth. But years later, when Sennacherib finally sacked the city, teams meticulously updated older tablets. They inserted new victories into past events, creating the illusion of unstoppable momentum. One tablet even shifts the timeline of a rebellion, making it seem like rebels surrendered faster than they actually did. These weren't minor tweaks. They were full-scale historical revisions. Why did no one notice? Because the Assyrian public rarely saw original records. Copies were distributed to temples and allies, with discrepancies lost in translation. Even senior officials might not catch edits, as only master scribes knew the full archives. The system worked until the empire fell. When Nineveh burned, tablets baked solid, preserving the original, unedited versions beneath layers of clay. Modern X-rays now expose these ghost texts, revealing the fragile reality behind the empire's myth-making. This scandal forces us to question how much of history is fact versus fabrication. The Assyrians weren't alone in bending the truth, but their forgeries were breathtakingly systematic. Next time you see a king's boast carved in stone, remember, it might just be the version he wanted you to see. And as we'll soon discover, the empire's secrets didn't stop at its borders. Far beyond the heartland, a forgotten Assyrian colony thrived in the shadows, blending cultures in ways that defied textbook narratives. But history rarely confines itself to the grand capitals and battlefields. Sometimes, the most revealing clues emerge from the quiet edges of empires, far from the towering ziggurats of Nineveh, nestled in the rugged highlands of Anatolia. Archaeologists stumbled upon a puzzle that rewrites the story of Assyria's reach. Here, in what's now modern Turkey, lay the remains of a forgotten Assyrian trading outpost, its artifacts whispering of cultural fusion and ambitions that stretched further than anyone imagined. The site, unearthed near the ancient town of Tushhan, defied expectations. At first glance, it looked like a typical Assyrian administrative center. Clay tablets inscribed with cuneiform, seals bearing royal insignia, and the familiar motifs of winged deities. But dig deeper, and the anomalies began piling up. Local pottery shards bore Assyrian designs alongside distinctly Anatolian patterns, as if two artistic traditions had collided and coexisted. A stone relief depicted a procession of Assyrian officials, yet their robes were trimmed with Hittite-style embroidery. Even more telling were the tablets. While written in Akkadian, they referenced gods from both pantheons, with prayers to Ashur awkwardly wedged beside invocations to the Hurrian storm god Teshub. This wasn't just a military garrison, it was a cultural crossroads. How did this hybrid enclave come to be? The answer lies in a shadowy chapter of Assyrian economics. Texts from Nimrud mention a network of Karam autonomous trading colonies that operated like ancient corporate franchises. Merchants from Assyria's heartland would settle in distant regions, exchanging tin and textiles for local silver while skirting heavy imperial taxes. The Anatolian outpost, likely established around the 9th century BC, thrived in this gray zone. It wasn't conquered territory, nor was it fully independent. Instead, it existed in a delicate balance, adopting local customs to ease trade while maintaining enough Assyrian identity to please distant kings. The artifacts tell stories no official chronicle would. One seal impression shows an Assyrian trader shaking hands with a Phrygian noble, their garments blending both cultures' designs. A clay tablet records a marriage contract between an Assyrian merchant's daughter and a Hittite metalsmith, proof that these connections went beyond commerce. Most striking is a small bronze figurine, half Lamassu, half Anatolian lion, its wings etched with cuneiform and hieroglyphic symbols side by side. This wasn't accidental cultural leakage. It was deliberate synthesis, yet mainstream histories barely mention these colonies. Why? Because they didn't fit the empire's propaganda. Assyrian kings preferred narratives of brutal conquest, not nuanced collaboration. Records from Nineveh dismiss Anatolia as a land of uncivilized tribes, ignoring the vibrant exchange happening on the ground. Even archaeologists initially overlooked the site, assuming it was just another military outpost. Only when a team re-examined the tablets in the 2010s did the truth emerge. The scribes here weren't glorifying kings, they were documenting loans, marriages, and contracts, the messy human reality of empire. What does this lost colony reveal? That Assyria's power wasn't just built on terror, but also on adaptability. While kings boasted of reducing cities to rubble, their own merchants were cutting deals and blending traditions in the hinterlands. This outlier settlement forces us to rethink the empire's legacy, proving that even the most rigid superpowers relied on flexibility at their fringes. And as we'll see next, the Assyrians' willingness to rewrite reality extended beyond politics into the very stars they worshipped. Now let's turn from the bustling trade routes to the private chambers of Assyria's rulers, where dreams held terrifying power. Among the thousands of clay tablets recovered from royal archives, some of the most revealing weren't battle plans or tax records, they were dream diaries. These intimate accounts, etched in cuneiform by trembling scribes, show us kings haunted by visions they believed foretold the empire's fate. Take the diary of King Ashurbanipal, for instance. One tablet describes a recurring nightmare where the god Ashur appeared as a towering figure with crumbling wings, dropping a tablet inscribed with the words, "The leash is broken," into a roaring river. The king's priests interpreted this as a dire warning. The divine mandate binding Assyria's enemies in submission was weakening. Remarkably, this dream occurred just years before major vassals like Babylon began revolting. Another entry tells of Ashurbanipal seeing his royal crown devoured by locusts, an omen his advisors linked to crop failures that later sparked famine. But the most chilling records come from the reign of Esarhaddon, a ruler plagued by health problems and paranoia. His tablets describe feverish visions of shadowy figures dismantling the walls of Nineveh brick by brick. In one, his ancestors appeared as skeletal forms beckoning him to the House of Dust, the Mesopotamian underworld. These weren't mere bad dreams. The Assyrians believed dreams were messages from the gods, and royal nightmares required immediate action. After one particularly vivid vision, Esarhaddon ordered the mass sacrifice of white doves, symbols of peace, to appease the spirits, then launched a preemptive strike against suspected conspirators. The diaries also expose how dreams shaped policy. When Sennacherib dreamed of a flaming sword hovering over Babylon, he took it as divine approval to sack the city in 689 BCE, an atrocity even other Mesopotamians condemned. Decades later, his grandson's dream of a dying lion caused him to postpone a military campaign, a delay that allowed enemies to regroup. What makes these tablets extraordinary is their raw honesty. Unlike bombastic victory inscriptions, the dream records show vulnerability, kings admitting fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Some entries even suggest scribes may have edited dreams post-event to align with political needs. A tablet describing Ashurbanipal foreseeing Elam's defeat, for example, uses suspiciously perfect phrasing matching later triumphal carvings. Most haunting are the final entries before Assyria's collapse. A fragmented tablet from Sin-Shar-Rishkun's reign speaks of a flood sweeping the throne away, while another mentions the sun disk of Ashur sinking into darkness. Whether these were genuine premonitions or added after the fact, they reveal a profound truth. The mighty Assyrian Empire, for all its terror, was ruled by men who lay awake fearing the very doom their dreams predicted. Now let's step out of the shadowy realm of royal dreams and into the glaring light of a celestial crisis that shook the empire to its core. In the year 763 BC, a total solar eclipse darkened the skies over Assyria, and what should have been a predictable astronomical event spiraled into chaos. The priests who prided themselves on reading the gods' will in the stars had failed to foresee it, and their mistake sent shockwaves through the entire kingdom. This wasn't just a scientific error. To the Assyrians, eclipses were dire omens, often interpreted as the gods' displeasure or even a threat to the king's life. When the sun vanished without warning, panic erupted. Texts describe people flooding the temples, offering desperate sacrifices, while others hid in their homes, fearing the world was ending. The backlash was swift. The ruling king, Ashurdan III, faced immediate unrest, with revolts breaking out in cities like Ashur and Arapha. The eclipse became a political disaster, undermining faith in both the monarchy and the priestly class. What made this eclipse so destabilizing was its timing. It occurred during the month of Samanu, a period sacred to the sun god Shamash, making the event seem like a direct divine rebuke. Worse, the priests' astronomical tablets, which normally tracked celestial cycles with precision, contained no warning. Later investigations revealed why. the scribes had relied on outdated Babylonian models that didn't account for subtle variations in the moon's orbit. The error exposed a glaring weakness in Assyria's famed scholarly apparatus. In the aftermath, the royal court took drastic measures. The chief astronomer was quietly replaced, and a new team of scribes was ordered to recheck every celestial record. They cross-referenced decades of observations, correcting errors and even adding notations for future eclipses. One tablet from this period chillingly notes, "The sun's light was devoured on the 28th day. Let no king ignore this sign again." But the reforms went deeper. The eclipse became a propaganda tool. To regain public trust, the king's advisors spun the event as a divine test, a warning to purify the kingdom. Tax relief was granted to key cities and temple donations surged. Meanwhile, the priests doubled down on astrological studies, leading to breakthroughs in predicting lunar movements. Ironically, the same panic that nearly toppled the regime ended up strengthening Assyrian astronomy. The most revealing detail: a fragmentary letter from a provincial governor advising the king to command the scribes to write it differently next time. This suggests some records of the eclipse may have been altered retroactively to downplay the priest's failure. Whether through science or spin, Assyria couldn't afford another unanticipated darkness. By the next eclipse in 756 BC, the priests were ready. Their correct prediction restored order and, more importantly, their authority. This episode reveals an empire as terrified of the unknown as its enemies were of its armies. Even the mighty Assyrians, for all their military might, couldn't control the skies, but they could rewrite the story. Moving beyond celestial omens, let's unravel a hidden thread in Assyria's economic tapestry, one that rewrites the history of global trade. While the famous Silk Road is often credited to later empires like the Han Dynasty or the Parthians, Assyrian records tell a different story. Cuneiform tablets from the reign of Tiglath-Pileser III mention caravans bringing shimmering fabrics from distant eastern lands, predating the conventional timeline by centuries. These textiles weren't just exotic luxuries, they were status symbols worn by royalty and gifted to allies to flaunt Assyria's far-reaching influence. One palace inscription boasts of receiving 10 bolts of cloth bright as moonlight from a land called Hubushkia, likely in modern-day Iran or Afghanistan. The description matches archaeological finds of early silk fragments in Assyrian sites, some dyed with rare pigments like Tyrian purple, proof of a sophisticated trade network long before historians assumed it existed. What makes this revelation explosive is the logistics. Assyrian merchants didn't just wait for goods to arrive. They actively forged routes through hostile terrain, leveraging military outposts as trading hubs. A letter from a provincial governor details how royal engineers repaired mountain passes so the merchants of the east may pass safely. This wasn't casual barter. It was state-sponsored commerce, with armed convoys protecting shipments from bandits and rival kingdoms. The real smoking gun, a tablet from Nineveh's archives, lists tariffs imposed on silken bundles from the land of Elam, complete with seals from customs officials. This bureaucratic paper trail confirms silk wasn't an occasional curiosity. It was a regulated commodity, taxed and tracked like copper or grain. Even more telling, Assyrian artisans began imitating the fabric, blending imported threads with local linen to create cheaper alternatives, evidence of a booming demand that stretched beyond the elite. Critics once dismissed these references as poetic hyperbole, but recent scientific analysis backs the claims. Microscopic studies of residue on clay seals revealed traces of fibroin, a protein unique to silk, while Assyrian art depicts envoys wearing flowing robes unlike any local weave. The implications are staggering. If Assyria had access to silk as early as the 8th century BC, it means trade corridors to China or India were active far earlier than documented. Perhaps Assyrian traders even connected with Proto-Silk Road middlemen, bridging east and west in a network lost to time. This secret reshapes our view of Assyria from a brutal war machine to a commercial pioneer. Their appetite for shimmering fabrics didn't just fill royal wardrobes, it laid groundwork for the routes that would later define global exchange, proving that even the mightiest conquerors understood the power of a single, delicate thread. Now, let's venture into one of Assyria's most perplexing wartime mysteries, an encounter so bizarre it blurred the lines between reality and illusion. During the brutal campaign against Carchemish in the late 7th century BC, Assyrian military scribes recorded something extraordinary. Scouts returning from reconnaissance missions swore they'd seen spectral soldiers, a phantom army materializing in the mist, armed with weapons that gleamed unnaturally before vanishing without a trace. At first, King Ashurbanipal II dismissed these reports as battle fatigue. But when multiple patrols independently described identical visions, soldiers in archaic armor marching in perfect formation, their faces obscured by swirling dust, the royal court took notice. The descriptions didn't match any known enemy forces. Stranger still, these apparitions left no footprints, and arrows fired at them passed straight through as if striking air. Historians have debated this account for decades. One theory suggests mass hallucination triggered by ergot poisoning, a fungal infection of grain supplies that can cause vivid delusions. Assyrian soldiers often carried barley rations, and symptoms like muscle spasms and disorientation noted in other campaign records align with ergotism. But why would only the scouts at Carchemish be affected? A more chilling possibility involves psychological warfare. The city of Carchemish was a vassal of Assyria before its rebellion, meaning its defenders knew Assyrian tactics intimately. Some scholars propose they staged an elaborate hoax using polished bronze mirrors to project distorted reflections of their own troops across the battlefield, exploiting the Assyrians' superstitions. Ancient texts from Carchemish's ruins reference the mirrors of the gods used in temple rituals. Could these have been weaponized? The most tantalizing clue comes from a cracked tablet found near the Euphrates River. It details how Carchemish's priests performed an emergency ritual to summon the host of dead kings. When Assyrian forces breached the outer walls, this wasn't mere propaganda. Assyrian siege records note that their advance inexplicably halted for 3 days precisely when the ghost sightings peaked before resuming with unusual ferocity. Did the defenders buy critical time by weaponizing their enemies' fears? Modern forensic archaeology adds another layer. Soil samples from the battle site show abnormally high levels of magnetite, a mineral that can create localized magnetic anomalies. In rare conditions, these can distort light and sound, potentially triggering auditory hallucinations. Combine this with the stress of siege warfare and the Assyrians' belief in omens, and you have a recipe for collective paranormal experiences. What makes this secret so compelling is its ambiguity. Unlike clear-cut military stratagems, the ghost army of Carchemish forces us to reckon with the psychological dimensions of ancient warfare. Whether hallucination, trickery, or something stranger, this event reveals how even history's most disciplined conquerors could be shaken by the unexplained. And it begs the question how many other supernatural encounters in antiquity might have equally fascinating explanations hiding in plain sight. Now, let's uncover another shadowy chapter of Assyrian history, one where faith turned into fierce suppression. Deep in the ruins of Nineveh, archaeologists unearthed a temple unlike any other, its walls etched with deliberate scars. This was no ordinary act of vandalism. The defaced reliefs and shattered statues bore the marks of a calculated campaign to erase Ishtar, the revered goddess of love and war, from public memory. The temple's discovery sent shockwaves through the academic world. Unlike structures damaged by invaders, this sacred site showed signs of systematic destruction carried out by Assyrians themselves. Every depiction of Ishtar had been meticulously chiseled away, her face gouged, her symbols obliterated. Even ritual texts mentioning her name were scraped clean from clay tablets. The violence of the erasure spoke volumes. This wasn't random chaos, it was a purge. Timing holds the key to this mystery. The temple's defacement coincides with the reign of Ashurbanipal's successors, a period when Assyria's empire began to fracture under internal strife. Historical records hint at a growing power struggle between traditionalist factions and those who worshipped Ishtar's more inclusive cult. Unlike the rigid, state-sanctioned worship of Ashur, Ishtar's temples welcomed women, foreigners, and even slaves as devotees. To conservative elites, this threatened the empire's hierarchical order. One revealing clue comes from a surviving royal decree, fragmented but damning. It condemns the unseemly rites of certain priesthoods, accusing them of sowing discord among the people. Scholars believe this targets Ishtar's clergy, who may have resisted the king's centralized control. The temple's location adds weight to this theory. Built near the palace district, it was a high-profile symbol of Ishtar's influence, one that had to be toppled both literally and ideologically. But the most chilling evidence lies in what wasn't destroyed. Amid the wreckage, excavators found intact altars to Ashur and other male deities. The selective nature of the damage points to a theological coup, not random iconoclasm. Even more telling, the defacement tools were left at the scene, chisels and hammers stamped with the royal seal. This was state-sponsored deicide. The aftermath of this purge rippled through society. Private shrines to Ishtar in homes vanished overnight. Prayers to her were scratched out of personal amulets, yet traces of her worship persisted in hidden forms. Tiny clay figurines of the goddess, likely used in secret household rituals, have been found buried beneath floors or tucked into walls, suggesting her followers quietly resisted the purge. What makes this secret so haunting is its modern resonance. The temple's ruins serve as a stark reminder of how power and faith can collide, rewriting history with a chisel's edge. But as the hidden figurines prove, even the most ruthless campaigns can't fully extinguish what people hold sacred. And that raises a provocative question: what other suppressed beliefs might still lie buried, waiting for their stories to be told? Moving from the ruins of faith to the ashes of an empire, we arrive at one of Assyria's most tantalizing mysteries: the vanishing act of its last king. When Nineveh fell in 612 BCE, history tells us the Assyrian Empire crumbled under the combined forces of Babylonians and Medes. But what if the official story hides a remarkable escape? Crumbling clay tablets recovered from the smoldering ruins hint at a daring midnight flight, suggesting the royal line may have outlived the empire itself. Among the chaotic records of Nineveh's final days, one fragmented account stands out. A scribe's hurried cuneiform mentions a crownless procession slipping through the Husa gate under cover of darkness, escorted by loyal guards and chariots stripped of royal insignia. The text breaks off mid-sentence, but not before naming Ashurbanipal II, the very king historians assumed perished in the city's collapse. This single tablet rewrites the empire's last breath from defeat to disappearance. The route of this phantom convoy only deepens the intrigue. Tablets found near Haran, an ancient Assyrian stronghold, describe a royal entourage arriving weeks after Nineveh's fall. Haran wasn't just any refuge, it was the empire's former religious heart, home to the temple of the moon god Sin. Was this a symbolic last stand? Archaeologists discovered hastily reinforced walls and Egyptian-style arrowheads at Haran, evidence of a desperate defense. Even more telling, a broken cylinder seal bearing Ashurbanipal's name, found not in ruins but carefully buried beneath what may have been a makeshift throne room. For years, scholars dismissed these clues as wishful thinking until genetic studies added fuel to the fire. Modern DNA analysis of skeletons from a Haran-era tomb revealed mitochondrial lineages matching earlier Assyrian royalty. One male skeleton, buried with a corroded iron scepter, carried a rare genetic mutation previously identified in the remains of Sennacherib's family. The dating aligns perfectly with Nineveh's fall. Could this be the fugitive king or his heir? Perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from beyond Assyria's borders. Egyptian records from Pharaoh Psamtik I's reign mention granting asylum to the shattered crown of the north. While the text doesn't name Ashurbanipal directly, the timing corresponds to when the fleeing convoy would have reached the Sinai. Even more striking, Assyrian-style jewelry suddenly appears in elite 26th dynasty tombs at Thebes, including a lapis lazuli scarab engraved with cuneiform too small to read without magnification. Was this a king in exile leaving his mark? The implications ripple through history. If Assyria's royal line survived even briefly, it reshapes our understanding of the ancient Near East's power vacuum. Could remnants of the court have influenced emerging powers like the Medes or Babylonians? Some researchers point to sudden Assyrian motifs in early Persian art as possible clues. Others speculate about lost alliances. Letters from Tyrian merchants reference pale kings bargaining with Phoenician ships around this era. Every fragment suggests the empire's fall wasn't an endpoint but a scattering. What makes this secret endure isn't just the thrill of royal survival, it's what the escape reveals about Assyria's resilience. Even in collapse, their mastery of logistics and secrecy shines through. The convoy's route bypasses known Babylonian checkpoints. Supplies were cached in advance at way stations. False trails appear in desert carvings. This wasn't panicked flight. It was a contingency plan centuries in the making, proving the empire understood its vulnerabilities long before the siege towers breached Nineveh's walls. As the dust settles on this mystery, we're left with a haunting possibility that history's most feared empire may have whispered its legacy into the next age, not with a bang, but with the quiet hoofbeats of horses fleeing into the Syrian night. And somewhere beneath the sands, undiscovered tablets may yet confirm that the Assyrian crown never truly fell, it merely went underground. As we reach the end of our journey through the shadows of the Assyrian Empire, one thing becomes undeniably clear: this was a civilization that thrived on secrets. From the coded messages hidden in the stone eyes of the Lamassu to the ghostly convoy of its last king, Assyria's legacy isn't just written in clay tablets and towering ziggurats. It's etched in the gaps between what we know and what we've yet to uncover. Think about it. The empire's scribes altered royal records, their engineers buried siege blueprints in plain sight, and their kings whispered prophecies onto dream tablets. Even their walls dripped with symbolism, blood-red paint mixing terror and power. This wasn't just an ancient superpower, it was a masterclass in psychological warfare, celestial calculation, and bureaucratic cunning. So why does this matter today? Because every time we peel back another layer, whether it's the Nimrud Lens's optical mystery or Queen Nakia's vanished tomb, we're reminded that history isn't a static script. It's a living puzzle. Those primitive ancients, they were innovating with water clocks, trading silk centuries before the Silk Road, and possibly even dabbling in early chemical warfare with their mysterious black oil. Here's the real takeaway. The next time you see an Assyrian artifact in a museum or a photo of their reliefs, don't just glance, look closer. That unassuming carving of a lion hunt. It might be tracking celestial events. That broken bit of pottery, it could hold censored tax records or a scribe's private joke. History's greatest secrets aren't always locked away. They're often hiding where no one thinks to question. Now it's your turn. Which of these 25 revelations shocked you the most? Was it the poisoned gardens of Ashurbanipal, the ghost army of Carchemish, or something else entirely? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if you've got another historical mystery itching for a deep dive, let me know. Maybe your suggestion will be the next video. Before you go, if this journey through Assyria's hidden corners fascinated you, don't forget to hit that like button. It helps others discover these untold stories. Subscribe and ring the bell so you won't miss our next adventure into history's forgotten cracks. Until then, keep questioning, keep digging, and remember, the past never stops surprising us. See you in the next video.